is our Building Resilience in the Legal Profession series. This is a talk on a student's guide to substance abuse. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Erica Flores Baltadano. I am the campus dean at San Luis Obispo College of Law. And I'd like to welcome all students that are watching, students from any of our campuses that might be tuning in today. And I want to just first indicate that the Building Resilience in the Legal Profession series started, I began I think in 2023, and the idea was to share, to bring in speakers who could talk about issues of importance in the legal community that we don't necessarily talk about in law school. They're not part of a core law school curriculum. So we've had someone come and talk about imposter syndrome. We've talked about stress management and finding your equilibrium and different topics of that nature. So today we are going to turn to another topic. We're going to talk about substance use and substance abuse and how it pertains specifically to law students and also in the broader context of the legal profession. Because I think it's a really important topic to talk about. And I, when you are an attorney practicing in any area of law, you sometimes get a case that comes to you, and there's something it's going to involve some area of law that's outside of your area of expertise, right? That's going to be outside of your competency. So that's why I like to bring in experts. And so I am so thrilled today to welcome to this conversation Tom Buckley, who is the executive director of Aspire Counseling Services in San Luis Obispo and has spent more than 20 years working in mental health and addiction. He is a certified alcohol and drug counselor, a social worker, and a consultant who focuses on expanding access to care, strengthening community partnerships, and building programs that reduce stigma, remove barriers, and support long-term healing and recovery. Tom's path into this work is very personal. He is in long-term recovery himself, and his lived experience drives his commitment to meeting people where they are, building resilience, and creating environments where individuals feel safe enough to ask for help. His leadership is grounded in compassion, accountability, and the belief that connection is the foundation to healing. So in addition to leading Aspire Slow, Tom teaches. He teaches in the Addiction Studies and Human Services program at Cuesta College and provides behavioral health counseling to organizations across California. Born and raised right here in San Luis Obispo, he uses his local roots, professional experience and expertise, and his personal story to inspire hope and expand access to high quality care for teens and adults in our community. So, Tom, I am so delighted that we had the opportunity to meet not too long ago, and I really appreciate you spending your time with us today.
Well, thank you so much, Erica. I really appreciate you having me. And thank you for doing this. I think this is such a value to your community and your students. I would have loved to hear the show on imposter syndrome and stress management, honestly, as I
Yeah.
think those are two driving factors that play a huge role in mental health and addiction issues. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I wanted to have this conversation because we know that mental health issues are on the rise. We certainly see an increase in that in our student population. And I personally think, as a former constitutional law professor, I think that what's going on in our country right now, politically, legally, constitutionally, I think that contributes to stress and anxiety. It certainly has contributed to my stress and anxiety. And I think it's just a particularly challenging time to be a law student. But I would just say, under any circumstances, law school is stressful, right? And we're teaching students how to think in a new way. We're asking them to back up and support everything that they say, right? And so we're putting a lot on students to enter, to have the opportunity to be a part of the what I consider a very noble profession. And our students in particular, they're balancing families, they're balancing full-time jobs, they're balancing all of that with school. And so I think there's just a lot. And while sometimes substance use can be a coping mechanism. It can be sort of a form of self-medication. We also know that it can really exacerbate mental health issues. And so that's why I thought it was important for us to have this conversation. But I also think, and we're having this conversation privately, right? You and me right now, but we're going to make this recording available to all of our students. I want to share it out. It's something that I hope that my colleagues, the campus deans at all of our campuses will continue to share out because I think it's just important for students to feel safe and to have a way to access this information because I think we need to start by talking about stigma and talk a little bit about talk a little bit about shame and maybe even guilt. So I'm just going to hand it over to you and wonder if we can just start there, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely does. And such an important conversation. As you were talking, I was just thinking about my journey in this field over the last 20 years. And before that, as a young person who greatly struggled with trauma
Mhm.
and difficult family dynamics where mental health and addiction were present my whole life. And I remember, I think I started in this work at 26 years old as a case manager down in LA. And it was both in academia and school and at work, it was really pushed that we are not to share our experience.
Hmm.
Um, that self-disclosure is a bad thing. And then over the years, self-disclosure has been viewed a little bit differently, where, okay, as long as it's brief and in the best interest of the client. Now, I 100% agree. If we're going to self-disclose as a counselor, as a therapist, social worker, it has to be in the best interest of the client. I've seen unhealed people come into this profession and, when you're hurt, it's easy to hurt others. It's easy to bleed on other people, right? But that being said, I think we're in a different time and age where um, people need authenticity. They need to see that someone is able to be real and vulnerable. And once they see that, they're much more likely to feel connected and then be willing to explore what needs to be explored. So it's taken me a long time to be comfortable fully sharing my story. In fact, you were very professional and considerate, asking me carefully what I want to share. And I think I finally just decided at 47 years old to rip the Band-Aid off and just share and be real. A lot of why I'm nervous of sharing and being real of my story is because of the shame,
Mhm.
because of the worry of how it's going to affect my view on to the community.
Mhm.
I think it's easy to believe that people that have mental health and addiction issues are destined for a life of failure,
Mhm.
a life of pain, a life of suffering, a life of crime, a life of hurting themselves and hurting others. And that absolutely can be a part of it. But some of the most successful, talented people I know are folks that come from this background, are folks that struggle with mental health and addiction. And recovery is a lifelong journey. There's no finish line.
Right.
Just like physical fitness.
Yeah.
We both know, right? There's no stopping going on our walks and going to the gym, and it's forever.
As much as I wish it weren't.
Me too. I know, right? But we keep going because physical fitness is important and so is mental fitness. And so I think we need to have important conversations like this. And I came from a family where um, I had a father who was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and died a very excruciating and painful death when he was 36 years old from his alcoholism. And before that, was not present in my life, or very rarely present in my life. And that created a lot of attachment issues and trauma and grief that as a young man without a guiding force like a father, with a mom who struggled with her own issues and was trying to keep the family together, with an older half brother that ended up dying by suicide a year after my dad died. I had no skills and no tools how to manage those issues. And so the second that I found substances, it was a very quick answer um, to my pain. It was a very quick way for me to relieve root causes that I didn't even know were there. I didn't have awareness on that until I was much older. Um, And you mentioned in my bio that part of what I do is to help increase access and decrease barriers. Well, I remember being at Bishop's Peak Elementary and struggling and not having resources. And to come back here 20 something years later and see that San Luis Obispo County still struggles, is still a resource desert, just motivated me more. So, shame, stigma, they keep people silent. Silence is dangerous.
Mhm.
Shame delays help.
Mhm.
So I guess, if we normalize asking for help, we can save careers, save families, save lives.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that and sharing a little bit about your story. And I imagine that there's a range, right? So you had one experience and someone else's experience may be very different from yours, but the we want to provide access to resources regardless of what one's experience has been. And I think you also talked about uh, the importance of setting aside shame or stigma to seek that help. And I think that's particularly important for, my law students who are at the cusp of entering this new profession, right? They are getting this graduate education to that's going to prepare them to then um, fulfill another very stressful thing, which is to sit for the California bar exam, only to then enter what we know to be a very stressful profession. So I think it's important that if anyone thinks that they might have a problem or has ever wondered to maybe start reaching out sooner than later. And we're going to get into the mechanics of that because there are actually real concrete reasons why it's important to get help now because of the requirements to pass to become a California licensed attorney. So we're going to touch on that. So I want to and also we know that there's been a longstanding problem of substance abuse in the legal profession, and I just want to highlight the results of a very recent. Actually, this study was completed. It was initiated in 2020, and it was completed in 2021. It was a partnership between California Lawyers Association and the DC Bar, the District of Columbia Bar, and what they were researching was they wanted more insight into personal and workplace risk factors for mental health problems, substance use, and also attrition. So why do lawyers leave the profession? But what I want to focus on some of their key findings is that roughly half of practicing attorneys are experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety, with approximately 30% in the mid-range and nearly 20% falling in the moderate severe range. So that's pretty significant on the mental health front. And then over half of the attorneys that were screened were positive for risky drinking, and 30% screened for high risk hazardous drinking. And according to this study, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but that high risk hazardous drinking would be interpreted as alcohol abuse, right? And possible dependence. So, and then I'll just note because a majority of our students in our program are women. Women are experiencing meaningfully worse mental health than men and are drinking more hazardously. So that's a little bit of framing the issue in our profession. And so I just want to start at the very basics, Tom. What do I do? What does a student do if they think they might have a problem? What's the first step?
You know, gosh, such good information. I want to backstep a little bit
Sure, anytime.
to talk about what you said about different stories and experiences, because I think that people hear a story like mine, oh my gosh, listen to that trauma he went through. My situation's not that bad. I feel guilty even asking for help when other people have gone through something like this. My grandma used to say comparison is the thief of joy.
Mm,
Comparison's the thief of healing too.
mm,
Why are we going to wait for the wheels to fall off the bus before we rotate the tires?
yeah.
So I would really uh, strongly suggest to our listeners and all of us that we don't wait, we be proactive. It's so much easier to stay in shape than get in shape. It's
Mm,
so much easier to stay healthy than get healthy. And so waiting for your stage of addiction to get more and more severe, and mental health issues in general are progressive.
mm,
And so it's just a snowball rolling downhill. Um, so there is no comparison when it comes to folks that walk in. I'm at my office here at Aspire Counseling in San Luis Obispo, and the majority of our adults are working professionals. And I have lawyers and doctors and nurses and pilots and people who really were nervous, first responders, people who were really nervous about asking for help because they thought it was going to impact their ability to work and stay in their field.
yes.
But again, I think 2025, 2026, we're starting to realize business is starting to realize that we need to support this to be able to maintain employees. Um, Unhealed mental health and addiction issues costs American companies billions of dollars every year. So I do think that the narrative is changing. So I think the first thing to ask yourself is, do I have a problem? Do I want to wait until I have a problem, or do I want to take action now? Um, what is addiction? Continuing to do something even though the negative consequences outweigh the positive benefits.
Mm,
So we all we've all been guilty of feeling nervous at a social event and having a glass of wine or a cocktail, right? And loosening up. Or you want to go make an impression with the people at work and they're all going out for drinks after. And it's just a part of this culture. Um, it's when we start to realize, wow, I'm waking up feeling terrible. I'm not getting my papers done on time. I'm feeling an increase in anxiety and depression. Alcohol is the number one cause of something that people consume regularly that is directly linked to depression and anxiety. And so it's amazing to me the amount of professionals I have that are on anxiety medications but are still drinking regularly. Um,
So I think, can I just jump in to say, I think in
Please,
the
yeah.
context of law school, let's say, this could take the form of maybe not excessive drinking, right? But maybe I have to have a glass of wine every time I get home from my evening class. And if you miss a night, it's causing problems for you, right? So that kind of dependency, even if it's a small quantity, but it's a dependency. Is that, can you?
100%. And it's a coping tool that's not going to end well. That may be okay right now, but by the time you're my age, that's going to progress,
Right.
right?
One glass isn't going to cut it. Yeah.
It's not going to cut it. And even more so is why. I have plenty of friends that are successful, happy, healthy individuals that can have a glass of wine socially, that can drink, that can whatever they do, and they don't have the same gene that I have.
Mhm.
And that's just, addiction, just like everything is on a spectrum, right? But if in your 20s, in your 30s, whatever age you are pursuing your education and law school, if the only way you know how to cope or how to unwind or how to relax is through that, that's a very slippery slope. And
Yeah,
it's probably a message that there's an underlying issue there that needs to be addressed. What's going on? How come I don't have any other coping tools?
right.
This isn't just about having wine on vacation or champagne on New Year's. This is I'm stressed, and my number one coping tool to deal with stress is alcohol.
Yeah.
And yeah, you may be one of the lucky ones that gets through your whole life with just staying at that baseline. But most people I know, eventually that progresses. And, we have a group counseling format, and I have people as young as 18 and
Mm,
as old as we have an 82-year-old right now who wants to quit drinking, who retired about 10, 15 years ago as a teacher, as a professor. And as she's retired, her drinking has amplified. She's a
mm,
spitfire. I can't believe the energy that she has. But it wasn't until she stopped working a decade ago that she realized, wow, I've been working my tail off my whole career, but the second I get home, I consume. And then when work stops,
mm.
the consumption got bigger and greater.
Yeah. So, yeah, so I think, whether it's I need to have something before I come to class, to get through class, or I need to have something after class, or suddenly I'm not making deadlines, or I didn't realize this class had been rescheduled and now I missed the class. And, sometimes, that sort of thing. I think these are the ways in which it can start to impact. And I would also say, it could start impacting relationships too. And this is a very small um, law school. It's a very small legal community. And so I think I'm going to just take a little side trip here for just a quick moment to maybe talk about impacts on relationships because I always tell our students that you're a graduate student now. Your professional relationship begins, I'm sorry, your professional reputation begins now. So you are demonstrating to your classmates who you are as a person, how you carry yourself professionally. And one day in the near future, you're going to be out there looking for a job. And if you have pissed off the people in your small cohort, because you're unreliable or you're intoxicated all the time or whatever the case may be, and they're working at the firm that you want to work at, they may not put in a good word for you. So, can you maybe just talk about the impacts not only on what this does to an individual, but maybe how it can have a ripple effect with their relationships?
Yeah. Yeah, it really can. And it's a buildup that sometimes people don't see.
Yeah.
It starts with miscommunication or isolation, or maybe you're not prioritizing those relationships because you need to get home and unwind, or whatever the case may be. But addiction significantly impacts our ability to connect and our relationships. At some point, you look back after addiction has developed into a more serious problem and really see the wreckage of your past. And then the whole aspect of professionalism in this community. Holy cow, San Luis Obispo is so small. If you're in school right now, if you're in law school right now, your professional reputation starts now.
Thank you for that's saying that. That's right.
Yeah. So I think sometimes that's not looked at enough.
Mhm.
Folks are so concerned with making sure they get good grades or get that good internship, but are you also developing a reputation that is going to be able to get you to where you need to be, and connections that are developed on trust and mutual respect?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So I think it is important for us to emphasize how important it is to seek help now during law school, if you think that you might have a problem. And this is for, some of the reasons we've already talked about. But, when someone is trying to become accepted to the California State Bar, they of course have to have the legal degree, they have to have their legal training, they have to pass the bar exam, and they also have to pass something that we call the moral character examination. And for students that might not yet be familiar with what that involves, candor and honesty on the moral character exam are crucial. And it does include questions about substance use and abuse and treatment, possible treatment. So this is the reason why do we need to have this information? It's because of California Professional Rule 1.1, which defines a lawyer's duty of competence. So an attorney has to be competent to practice law, and the definition of competence includes a wide range of well-being related proficiencies as well. So, for example, the California State Bar has clarified that for purposes of Rule 1.1, competency applies both to learning and skill, but also mental, emotional, and physical ability reasonably necessary to perform a legal service. So we're getting at issues of competency. And then I would also say the California State Bar Rule 4.40 talks about moral character as including qualities of honesty, fairness, candor, trustworthiness, observance of fiduciary responsibility, respect for and obedience to the law, and respect for the rights of others, and the judicial process. So the moral character examination also requires references. So you're going to have to provide references who will then have to complete a survey, and they will have to vouch for the bar applicant's honesty, their trustworthiness, their respect for the law, integrity, work ethic, and conduct. And again, the goal is to get to whether is this individual fit to practice law. And so I want to be very clear that a history of use or abuse of substances is not going to necessarily lead you to fail your moral character exam. There's been that's been very clear. And but what it is that there could be misconduct, there could be legal misconduct, there could be behaviors in law school, and then we talked about the reputational stuff, right? The relationship stuff. Those are the things that are kind of like the fallout from the substance use, or just having a problem that you haven't taken steps to address, right? You're not in recovery. Those are the things that could make it difficult to, secure good recommendations and maybe struggle a little bit on the moral character examination. So I want to again, let's go to some initial steps. What do we do? What do I do if I have a problem? And what are some resources that you can point to? And I will also point to some very specific ones as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. First things first is awareness, and the willingness to listen.
Mhm.
Boy, we have a hard time listening to our loved ones. And a lot of times people will say, well, how will I know if I have a problem? Probably someone in your life that loves you has already talked to you about it.
Mm,
Um, you know, a partner, a friend, a sibling,
mhm,
addiction and mental health issues, like we talked previously, impact our loved ones so significantly. So most likely someone has said something, even in a careful way.
mhm,
And are we listening?
mhm,
And we're not listening when we're not ready to face the truth or we don't want to hear it.
mhm,
You know, um, when people ask me, how do I know if I have a problem? It's about brutal honesty. It's about looking inside. And it's not just, am I in the streets? Am I in the gutters?
Yeah,
I think that's another thing. People wait for things to get catastrophic. Are you living your best life?
yeah.
Are you living, are you up to your full potential? The best version of yourself? Are you waking up with not enough energy or not enough organization?
Hmm.
You know, and some folks can be like, "Oh, I can go out and drink all night and still kill it at school." Imagine what you could do if you didn't.
Yeah, right. Right.
So, first steps, asking for help, one of the hardest steps,
Hmm.
you know, and for various reasons, shame, guilt, also experience. If you grew up in a situation in your life or at some point, whether it's in adolescence, childhood, adulthood, where you've tried to get help and help wasn't there, it feels very scary to ask for help later on.
Yeah.
Um, but asking for help is a skill, it's a muscle, and once you learn to develop that, it'll serve you for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
Um, Remembering that when we're struggling with addictions and mental health issues, we're not thinking logically.
Hmm.
And so owning that, understanding that, and being willing to listen to people that care about you that are thinking logically. Maybe it's a teacher, maybe it's a counselor, maybe it's a friend, parent. But having someone that you trust that can think logically for you when you're unable to.
Hmm.
And then, all the traditional stuff, your therapy, your counseling, your psychiatry, your 12 steps, your group support. These are all fantastic places to start. You just got to start.
Got to start.
And the
Yeah.
more support you put in your life, the better chances of recovery and then moving past just recovery. So much of recovery is let's build coping tools. I'm building thriving tools.
Hmm.
And so the quicker we start working on that, the quicker we can start to thrive. And every day is a chance to be a better version of who we were yesterday. Um, my last bit of advice on this topic is don't settle on one tool. Mental health
Hmm.
issues and addiction issues, it's like fighting in a war or in a battle, and you don't want one weapon
Hmm.
or you
Yeah.
don't want one tool. You know, you don't see a carpenter go with just a hammer on his
Right.
tool belt. So the more tools you have, the more equipped you are to deal with whatever is coming at you in regards to your mental health and addiction recovery.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's good, and I think that's really helpful to hear. And I want to go back to something you said about you're not thinking rationally necessarily when you're in the throes of an addiction, and so just maybe asking for help or sharing with someone that you have a problem, that's a huge step because that person might be in a better position to then connect you with help. And so you don't have to think about the nuts and bolts. You just need to trust that person. And I've been that person. I've had former students, from years ago confide in me that there's a problem. And so I can be helpful in connecting that person with resources. So thank you for saying that. I want to highlight some resources that are available for law students in particular, in addition to local providers like Aspiring Counseling. I think you take a lot of insurances and you offer individual and group sessions. But we also have resources available very tailored to our profession. And so I want to talk about the California State Bar's Lawyer Assistance Program. And all you have to do is Google CalBar Lawyer Assistance Program. And these are resources that are available for law students, for California State Bar applicants, and for lawyers. And what I want to say that's very important about the lawyer assistance program is that, first of all, it's all confidential. And the folks involved in this program know our profession very intimately. And so they understand the particular stigma and fear and, guilt that might be associated with asking for help when you're on the right at the cusp of starting your profession, right? Um, but something that's really wonderful that the lawyer assistance program can offer is, they can get into a monitoring sort of situation where if you're in recovery, They can monitor that recovery in such a way so that when it comes time to submit your moral character examination, they can provide that support. They can provide that reference and say, yes,
Wow.
this person had a problem, but they're in recovery and we've been monitoring them and we think that they're fit and competent to practice law. That's huge. And so I want, that's something that has to get started now, though. You want to start getting those services now. And then the other thing is something called the other bar. We talk about the bar exam and we also talk about the local watering hole, right? So, and that's otherbar.org. And that's also free, confidential, 24-hour. They will, connect you. It's help for students and their families with free and confidential help with alcohol and substance use and related personal problems. I've called the hotline and spoken to them myself just to get a sense of how a student would access this. And again, very attuned to the unique needs of our profession. And so they will then get you not only in touch with perhaps a 12-step anonymous program, but also local resources. But importantly, individuals in our profession who are in recovery and can be mentors and can be supportive and can help someone maybe get them to their first AA meeting or whatever the case may be. And then I think it's always just important to remind students in crisis that there's hotlines, right? There's also national hotlines, local hotlines, and we'll talk about that at the end as well. But so I just wanted to share those resources that are kind of very specific. I've made it a point to just have brochures about the lawyer assistance program and about the other bar just available here on campus, and because I want folks to know that those are things that they can access. So I want to talk a little bit about just navigating a culture of alcohol in law school and in the legal profession. And I was a law student at one point. I think things are a little bit better here, at least from my perspective. We're not hosting receptions on campus that are heavy with alcohol all the time. But it's like you talked about this, heading to a bar after class to unwind with your classmates. Trying to fit in with a law firm culture sometimes, things like that. And I I also know I've been practicing law in this community for 15 years now, and I know that there are folks in our community that are recovering, and that have had very successful careers that are very well respected. And so I think there's local resources and local examples of folks that are attending a social, the annual County Bar Association holiday social, and they're not having anything to drink, or they are participating, they are successfully immersed and well respected in our community, even though they can't do everything that maybe someone else is doing. So I just want to share that. But I also know that there are folks that don't have a great reputation in front of our bar or bench, because maybe they have a problem they haven't addressed yet. So, we want to uh, just recognize that if any student is struggling, you're not alone, right? We know that there's folks right here in our community that are struggling to ask for help or have been in recovery for many years and continue to be in recovery. So what are some tips for navigating a culture like this, and as our students prepare to enter the legal profession?
Yeah. You know, I think that we're in an interest, and again, we're in an interesting time where we're seeing such a reduction in alcohol use amongst younger people.
Mm.
I think some folks are starting to wake up to uh, the social crutch that it is, and that, there is Alcohol is toxic to our bodies, and the alcohol industry definitely doesn't want me sharing that, but that's the truth. The other thing I was thinking when you were talking, this small community, everyone knows everyone. I cannot leave here and go out to Vaughn's and not run into somebody that I went to elementary school with or played t-ball with or whatever.
Right.
And we all see each other at the restaurants.
Yeah. And
And
at the wineries,
at the
right?
wineries, at the music
Yeah.
events. I took my niece to the snow event, holiday event in Atascadero, and everyone's walking around with drinks in their hand. As far as the professional part of that, you know, I'm your target demographic. I am who is going to hire your students when they pass their bar and become professionals to represent my clients. And I am much more likely to hire someone that I know has years of recovery and I see in a 12-step meeting versus I see at the bar.
Hmm.
I know what it takes to be in recovery, and it's tenacity, and it's
Mm.
showing up every day.
Yeah.
And I also know what it takes to go to the bar every day.
Yeah.
So, again, back to reputation.
Yeah.
Law school, the legal profession, heavy, heavy drinking culture.
Yeah.
Social events, mixers, networking, alcohol is everywhere. San Luis Obispo County, especially, is a wine town. And when you're stressed, that culture can feel like a shortcut to belonging.
Yeah.
So you don't have to drink. You don't need alcohol to build your career. You need boundaries, you need clarity
Hmm.
and self-respect.
Hmm.
And so a lot of careers get damaged um, from addiction
Hmm. Hmm.
and from people ignoring the early warning signs and letting alcohol shape their reputation.
Yeah.
And people start to really notice when someone is unreliable or sloppy or reckless. So, yeah,
I just want to add to that. The California bar exam is not an easy test. We prepare our students starting from their first year in law school, and we know what works. We know what it takes to study for it. It does take tenacity. It does take determination. It does take focus. It takes a lot of hard work. Um, there's no shame in maybe having to take it more than one time as well. Sometimes that happens. Um, but I also know that substance use problems can really prolong that process. And I've seen that where someone is taking it multiple times, or, um, just not able to get through their preparation because they have this other big problem going on that really just needs to be addressed. And so I wanted to highlight that as well. And also I think I don't know if it's true. I think people think that more eyes are on them than is reality in a social situation. Like I think, someone hands you a drink, no one's going to notice if you set it down and walk away from it. And I think, and no one's going to notice if you go up to the bar and like I do all the time. I'm married to a judge, so we don't drink in public very often. It's just not a good look. And so I'll go, we get soda water. That's what we get. And bartender is perfectly happy to give me that. So I just think, there's ways to be apart without, you know, um, to have that sense of belonging without connecting in every way. Um,
yeah,
and
you're
so,
right.
yeah, and I think one thing that our students are just tremendous at is because this might be a second or third career for them. They are balancing families, they are balancing full-time jobs. They already have professional reputations in many regards, and so they are tenacious. They are determined. And I believe they are resilient because they're facing these challenges and they're figuring out how to manage and overcome and just manage a lot of different things at the same time. And so I think if anyone, if anyone can overcome adversity, I vote for our students. I really believe that they have the capacity to do this. And I also will say that they're very compassionate, right? And they are part of these very small cohorts of students. So our classes are intentionally small. We want our students to develop close relationships with their classmates and with their professors. Oftentimes, their professors become their mentors, become their employers down the road. And so I want to talk a little bit about not only we've talked a lot about looking out for oneself and taking care of oneself and what that means probably for your loved ones, right? And for your family members and for your children or your partners, but also looking out for others. And so what can we do if someone we care about seems to be struggling? And you mentioned earlier that if you're not sure whether you have a problem, someone has probably already suggested that you do. But how do you do that?
Mm. Yeah. Well, first of all, I love to hear how supportive and community-based your students are. And it sounds like your whole program.
Yeah.
I think being a part of being a strong professional is looking out for the people around you.
Mhm.
Um, if someone you care about seems off or is isolating, is slipping academically, drinking more, behaving out of character, I think just a simple check-in is where you start. Um, Kindness goes so much farther than we think.
Mhm.
Remembering that we don't have to fix them.
Mhm.
Dr. Gabor Mate is, I encourage you all to look him up, maybe look up his YouTube videos, but his concept is that the opposite of addiction is connection.
Mhm.
And so just that reaching out, saying something simple. I,
Yeah.
I notice you seem overwhelmed. I care about you. I'm here if you want to talk. And sometimes not even talk, just side by side being with someone. Some of the most impactful moments I've had in my life were people who, I've had different bouts of recovery in my life. The first one was over some significant drug abuse when I was a young person. And the friends that were willing to just go with me to a meeting
Mhm.
or sit with me in the therapist office. Still to this day, I look back and think about how just vital that was to me continuing on my journey.
Yeah.
And you also have people that will do the opposite. When they see you getting better, they're going to try to pull you back into their addiction. So it's finding the right tribe and leaning into the right people. But yeah, for your students that want to support others, it's showing up, being there, staying connected. And then obviously, if there's unsafe behavior, blackouts, drinking in a or driving in a blackout state, suicidal thoughts,
Mhm.
self-harm, not being afraid to get the help that person needs. I think sometimes people are so scared that, oh, I'm going to lose this friendship. Sometimes we lose friendships but save lives.
Mm. Yeah, that's tough. And
Yeah.
and that connectivity, that going towards someone, being with them, reaching out to them, sitting next to them, that can be really difficult when that person is pushing everyone away.
Especially if you're in a profession where, you know, attorneys, lawyers, detectives, doctors, we don't do well with not being able to fix something. We get a problem, we're like a dog on a bone, and we have to be able to continue to assess and recalibrate until we get to a solution. But
Yeah.
that's not always the case here. And it's not about us getting to the solution, it's about them getting to the solution. And So it can feel very scary to sit back and wait for someone to come to those conclusions or that awareness. But the more that they have strong people in their corner that they feel supported by, um, and you can be connecting without enabling,
Hmm.
I think the greater chance that person has to finding their way.
Sure. No, that's good. And it's also good to know that you might you might check in with someone or offer to be of help or provide resources to them that they're going to ignore the first 5 times, but maybe the sixth time it resonates. And I think that's something to keep in mind as well. I want to go back to something I meant to discuss earlier. And that is, can you talk a little bit about the value of group therapy or group meetings? Because I think I want to be sensitive also to costs. Costs are a real issue for families and for students in particular. And our law school does offer um, a limited number of free counseling. It's confidential. You don't need to go through an administrator to access it. It's all through telehealth. And those are, and I don't remember if it's 10 sessions or 12 sessions or less than that. I don't remember. But at some point, if people do need to reach out, um, I think sometimes there's this thought that, again, because of the shame, because of the stigma, they just want to be one-on-one private conversation with a therapist or a counselor. But what can you tell me about the value, not just the economic value, but the therapeutic value of group dynamics?
Yeah. So the first thing I think of is, I started my career as a case manager and social worker in LA and spent a majority of that first decade working in Skid Row and LA County Jail. And then from there, I went into program development and management everywhere from Malibu to Newport Beach to Laguna Hills and worked in some of the most high-end facilities in Southern California.
Can I just share? I'm from LA, and for those who might not have the reference, so your first decade was working with the very most vulnerable, most impoverished population, and
Yeah,
then you went into these communities that are very high wealth communities.
absolutely.
Okay, so
And looking back, the best treatment I ever saw was in Skid Row, Los Angeles.
interesting.
The strongest community I ever experienced was in Skid Row and LA County Jail.
Mm,
And so I think that a lot of times people have this idea that, oh, I have to go pay $100,000 to go to wherever in, all
some
the different
rehab.
high-end treatment centers. It's not the case. It's just not the case. In fact, there's a book called Inside Rehab that kind of shatters that idea and helps you look at the data and how you can create your own amazing rehab program through free services and low-cost services. Um, the other thing that people oftentimes have a very hard time with is the concept of group.
Yeah.
How many of you students right now that are listening to this can't stand role playing in your classes?
Mm,
Role playing is the foundation of the work I do with my interns, the foundation. I remember being in my 20s and role playing made me want to call in sick that day. Um, but those reps
hmm
are absolutely vital to us learning how to pivot and how to think on our feet and how to meet the need of our clientele. And I think that is applied with a lot of different professions, including lawyers. But group work is where the rubber meets the road. You're, I, and again, I'm not coming from a place of I had this all figured out. I was terrified from it at first, but you get so much different experience, different knowledge, different perspectives, different levels of accountability and support when you're in a room like that. And yeah, there's probably an economic value to being in a group setting too. 12-step meetings are available pretty much 24/7 now with online access, and they're free. Again, I think people should have multiple tools in their tool belt, but they're free. Um, the other analogy I love to give people is like a gym. People assume they need to pay for the highest end gym to go get in shape. I've seen people get in shape in their backyard with makeshift weights out of 5 gallon buckets.
Right.
You can go to the Y or Planet Fitness, or you can go to the higher end. It's all about how you go and lift the weights and participate in the exercises, and that's recovery.
Yeah.
It's about what you get in, or you get what you put in. You get out what you put in. And so I think that willingness to be uncomfortable, that's growth, that's progress. It's being uncomfortable. And that includes sitting in a group of strangers and being vulnerable, which is
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah, and I think you started out by saying attorneys, many professionals, we don't like a problem that we can't fix. We like to be in control. And I also think that we don't like to be uncomfortable, right? I mean, it's why I tell students the best thing you can do before you go give that presentation, before you go argue that motion in front of a judge, before you walk into a mediation, is prepare, prepare, prepare. And so we don't like to be uncomfortable. And so I think that's just something to just recognize. You are going to be uncomfortable the first time you go argue in court. You're going to be uncomfortable the first 20 times you argue in court. You're going to be uncomfortable the first time you argue in federal court when you've been practicing in state court your whole career. You're going to be uncomfortable the first time you maybe walk into a group session to publicly announce in the group that you have a problem, that you need help. And so I think, yes, being uncomfortable is something that none of us are comfortable with, but it's also, like you said, it's where the growth happens. And you're only uncomfortable for a certain amount of time, and then it gets better, right? Um, well, I think we've had a really, really interesting conversation, and I want to just remind students again of a couple of concrete resources available to them. And then I'm going to turn it over to you, Tom, to close out with any final thoughts or anything that maybe I haven't asked or we haven't discussed yet that you think is just really important to finish with. And so, again, students have access to anonymous counseling services through a third-party telehealth provider, through the law school. It's confidential. You don't have to go to an administrator to seek that information. I try to share it out at least once a semester just to remind students that it's there. We've got resources in our community. We've got Aspire Counseling that Tom has discussed. We know that there are access to group sessions and anonymous like AA type resources, 12-step programs, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week because of online access, but we also have local groups as well. And not to discount the power of those group settings. The California State Bar's Lawyer Assistance Program is an extremely helpful resource. They have a website full of resources. CalBar Lawyer Assistance Program is what you would Google. And you can also call their confidential hotline. And that's 877 LAP 4, the number 4, help. So again, that's 877 LAP 4 help. That's for the Lawyer Assistance Program. And then we talked about the other bar. And like I said, I called the number myself, and I was very appreciative of the conversation I had with the person that I spoke with. That's otherbar.org or 1-800-222-0767. 1-800-222-0767. And then students in crisis can also call a national toll-free suicide and crisis hotline if necessary. That's available 24/7. And that number is 1-800-273-TALK, TALK. 1-800-273-TALK. So, Tom, thank you. I'm going to thank you now. I really have appreciated our time. I'm really thrilled that our paths crossed at some point. I think it was in the context of my school board work. I appreciate that you've been a speaker in our local high schools. I think that's so important. I appreciate your commitment to education in our community, and I'm really glad that that your recovery, your lifetime of recovery, has led you back to your community. And so, thank you for sharing some of your lived and learned experience with our students today. And so, do you have any closing thoughts or anything that you want to make sure we talk about?
Yeah, thank you, Erica. This was a pleasure, and I just really think that you're creating a culture of connection that is so important, and it's honored to be a part of it. Um, a quick couple of resources. So, 12 Steps is one form of community support. There's also Smart Recovery. There's also Dharma Recovery. There's also other community-based groups that are available to you that don't have some of the same type of stigma attached to the 12 step. So really it's about continuing to find what works for you and not stopping at one. The other thing is recovery is not linear. My recovery has not been linear. It's been a journey up and down, left and right. I've picked myself up and fallen many, many times. But it's the tools that I've learned along the way that have allowed me to continue to move forward, continue to succeed in my life, and continue to, um, like we said earlier, be a better version than I was yesterday. Aspire is an intensive outpatient program. So we're developed for the working professional. We have Zoom and in-person option. I prefer the in-person option, but if you need Zoom because you have whatever reason, it's there. We're a solution-focused short-term program. And so making sure that after you do a program like this, you have the next journey lined up is super important. Aspire is in network with all insurance companies. And so we're able to bill your health insurance. That includes TRICARE and Medicare. The only insurance that we cannot accept at the moment is Medi-Cal or SimCal, but we have some community partners. So that being said, don't ever hesitate to call me, and I mean that. My family often isn't thrilled with how available I am, but that's just the way that I do business. I'm happy to connect. I'm happy to listen. I'm happy to point you in the right direction. Aspire isn't the right fit for everybody, but I have been in this community long enough where I pretty much know all of the referrals, and I'm happy to give those out. You can call us 24 hours a day to schedule an appointment at 888-585-7373, 888-585-7373. You can call my office 9 to 5 at 805-329-5595. Again, Tom with Aspire. Um, Addiction and mental health issues are not our fault, but they are our responsibility. And so understanding that the more effort we put into our healing, the more results we're going to see. I am sitting here today because of my willingness to eventually listen to the people who cared about me and then developing the skill of asking for help and taking that help. So do not hesitate to ask for help. It is truly a strength. And yeah, it was a pleasure. Congratulations to all of you and what you're doing in school, and good luck on your journey.
Thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate you speaking with us as part of our Building Resilience in the Legal Profession Speaker Series. This has been a guide to substance abuse and use for law students. And I will also just note that we're going to make this recording available on the Monterey College of Law YouTube page so that it'll just be an ongoing resource, just like we have our careers in the legal profession recordings on there. We're going to have this one on there as well. So thank you. You have you will reach many students, and I hope that that we can continue working together because I really appreciate all the work that you do in our community. Thank you, and hope to see you soon.
Take care.
Thank you.